Looking at here is the MURS version of the rb27 two-way radio. Now, there are a few things that make this better than FRS depending on the environment you're using it in. Now, if you're using this inside the city, FRS is going to dominate. But outside of the city, especially when you have a good line of sight, MURS is going to do much better. Now let's go over some of the specs and you'll see why. So let's take a look at what you get when you purchase one of these. Obviously you get a manual, a radio, a charging cradle, a little wall wart, and a lanyard. That's about it. But to be fair, that's about all you need. So on the back we have a detachable 1500 milliamp 5.5 watt hour lithium ion battery that can be charged with a USB-C cable. Now on our left side, the function buttons are pretty easy. At the top we have a flashlight button, we have a push to talk button, and we have our FM radio station button. All very simple. On the right side we have our standard microphone headphone jack, and it does appear to be somewhat weather sealed, although there is no waterproof rating for this radio. Now to be able to use the flashlight, you do have to turn the power on. The flashlight has two modes, standard on and flashing. Now as far as the front panel goes, this is probably the most user-friendly interface that Retevis has made. You have a scan button for your FM stations. You also have a monitor mode for your NOAA stations where you can scroll through up to 11 pre-programmed NOAA stations. Now I think there's only 7 in the United States, but there are some more in here. That might be for Canada or Mexico, not sure. You also have a channel select in the bottom right hand corner to let you switch between your high and low band there. Now when you select menu, it's basically going to let you go through and change some real basic functions. Things like ring, backlight, tone, TX, RX code, voice engine, things of that nature, and a few other things in there as you can see. Now I do believe TID Radio can program this, but it's also worth noting that there is a proprietary cable for this and software you can download and program it that way also. Now one other thing that's really cool about this compared to an FRS radio is you can actually take the antenna off of this and change it out with something with a little bit better gain, or if you want to do something like a tiger tail on it, that works also. So what I've decided to do to test this is I've built this jinky little stand here which actually will hold my FRS radio and my MURS radio. And I've run a cable from each headphone jack into a splitter into a Tascam recorder. We're going to take this out in the middle of Shelby Forest here. We're going to drop it off. We're going to hit the record button, and then we're going to drive around, transmit on each radio, and see which one delivers us the best signal. Now, I have a feeling that even though FRS does much better in the city, I think MURS is probably going to outperform it out here, or at least that's what I'm hoping. But we'll find out. All right, so we're out here at Shelby Forest and we're going to be doing the rural part of the test. Now, this is mainly to see if MURS works better than FRS in an open area. And what we have is our rig set up here. Have the antennas about the same height. These are 2-watt radios, both of them. And we have the headphone jacks wired into the Tascam recorder. We're going to drive around to different locations. I'll mark these on a map and we'll see what gets better reception, FRS or MURS. So let's go ahead and get our test started. So the location we're at now looks like an old abandoned ranger station. Looks like it's been torn down. We're going to go ahead and do our MURS radio test first. Radio test for MURS. Radio test for MURS to remote station. Radio test for MURS to remote station. All right, kick that off.
Turn on the radio.
Turn on our FRS. Radio test for FRS to remote station. Radio test for FRS to remote station. Radio test for FRS to remote station. All right, so we're going to pack it up. We're going to head to a few more locations. And, once all this is done, we just collect all the data, we map everything out, and, we go from there.
Radio test for MURS. Radio test for MURS to remote station. Radio test for MURS to remote station. Radio test for FRS to remote station. Radio test for FRS to remote station. Radio test for FRS to remote station.
All right, so we're at a little picnic area inside the park. We're going to go ahead, do our test to our remote station, start with MURS. MURS radio to remote station. MURS radio to remote station. MURS radio to remote station. All right. Now we do our FRS.
Turn on the radio once.
FRS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station. All right, we'll mark them on the map and we'll move on.
MURS radio to remote station. MURS radio to remote station. MURS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station.
All right, so we're at our next location. Even though we are out here in a state park, we are in an area that actually does have a transmission line running here, and we do have a little bit of overcast, some clouds coming in. So we'll go ahead and do our test here. We'll start with MURS. MURS radio to remote station. MURS radio to remote station. MURS radio to remote station. All right.
Turn on the radio one.
FRS. FRS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station. All right. We'll mark it and move on.
MURS radio to remote station. MURS radio to remote station. MURS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station. FRS radio to remote station.
So right now we're at the campground in Shelby Forest, and we're going to go ahead and transmit real quick. Now I'm going to make sure that our radios are turned off, or at least the one I'm not transmitting with, and we'll go ahead and start with MURS. Transmitting to remote station with MURS radio from campground. Transmitting to remote station on MURS radio from campground. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. I'm going to turn on our FRS radio. Transmitting on FRS to remote station from the campground. Transmitting on FRS to the remote station from the campground. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to hit some more locations and see which one of these works best.
Transmitting to remote station with MURS radio from campground. transmitting to remote station on MURS radio from campground.
Okay, so we're over by where I believe is the beginning of the Frisbee golf course. We're going to go ahead and call in, do a radio check. Frisbee Golf MURS to remote station. Frisbee Golf MURS to remote station. Frisbee Golf MURS to remote station. All right. Go FRS. Frisbee Golf FRS to remote station. Frisbee Golf FRS to remote station. Frisbee Golf FRS to remote station. All right, so we're going to go to probably like one more location and, mark everything out and compile all of our data, and we'll go from there.
Frisbee Golf MURS to remote station. Frisbee Golf MURS to remote station. Frisbee Golf MURS to remote station.
All right, so drove out to this old pavilion here where I filmed a couple of videos. We'll go ahead and start with MURS and see what kind of signal we get. MURS to the remote station from pavilion. MURS to the remote station from the pavilion. MURS to the remote station from the pavilion. All right, FRS time. FRS to remote station from the pavilion. FRS to the remote station from the pavilion. FRS to the remote station from the pavilion. All right, so I think this is going to be our last location. We're surrounded by trees here. I think we've got enough points or pins on the map here to be able to find out which one of these works best. Now, hopefully, we get some real definitive information as far as what's going to work better out here, whether it's going to be MURS or FRS. I do think these both being from the same company, both being 2 watts, similar size antenna, it's a pretty fair match. So we'll see how it turns out. Hopefully we get a lot of hits, but given the fact that these are 2 watts, we may not get much at all, but we're going to find out. So with that said, we're going to go ahead in this part and, head on back. I'll put everything together and we'll get our video going.
MURS to the remote station from pavilion. MURS to the remote station from the pavilion. MURS to the remote station from the pavilion.
Okay, so let's talk about these test results, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. First of all, for distance, MURS takes the win, no doubt about it. FRS dropped out just under a half a mile. MURS dropped out just under 3/4 of a mile. Both of these radios were 2 watts, had a similar size antenna, so I think it was a pretty fair match. Now, as far as sound quality goes, up until the point it dropped out, I think FRS had it hands down. Definitely easier to understand. A lot fuller voice, a lot clearer, as opposed to MURS, which seemed like a lot of static and then a little bit of voice wrapped up right in the center. And I believe that has to do with having those high band channels. Now, the other thing that I noticed, and it seemed like the MURS was more susceptible to this, was the fact that it was more susceptible to interference from those power lines. There were some TVA lines out there that seemed to wreak havoc not only on the MURS radio, but on my wireless microphone. Now, whether it affected the FRS radio the same, I don't know, but it didn't seem like it did. There's probably smarter people out there that could chime in and may have a better opinion on that than me. Now, let's talk about the big advantage. Even though the sound quality is a little bit better on FRS, I think there are things you could do to make the MURS radio even better. Now, it's already got an advantage of getting better distance, especially in a rural area. But the cool thing is that you can actually change the antenna on a MURS radio. You can't do that on FRS. So what you have there in front of you is just what you got to work with. The MURS radio, you can change the antenna out, You can put a tiger tail on it. There's a lot of things you can do to boost the range of that radio. And keep in mind, we are talking about license free here. If you're going to go ahead and get a license, whether it's a general or you're going to get your ham, there's definitely better options out there. But if we're talking license free and you want something in a rural setting where you're going to be out in the woods, have fairly decent line of sight, then I don't think you can go wrong with MURS. Now, as far as FRS goes, yeah, it does great inside the city. I'm sure it's smoke MURS radio inside the city because I know it works better with reflective surfaces. But, you know, like I said, if you're wanting something for camping, I would probably go with MURS. In any case, I hope I provided you with a little bit better clarity on what would work better in a rural setting, FRS or MURS. Just keep that in mind when you decide to buy your next radio system and the environment you're going to be using it in. Now, with all that being said, my name's Patrick with Uncle Bill's Camping. Thanks for stopping by to check out my video, and I will see you fine people the next time around.